All right, on behalf of the GNAR Initiative and the Western Night Skies Council, I wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar today. My name is Jake Powell. I'm the GNAR Initiative lead. The GNAR Initiative stands for Gateway and Natural Amenity Initiative, the GNAR. We're a regional hub for researchers, practitioners, and we really focus on research, education, and outreach for gateway communities throughout the Intermountain West. And we're housed in Utah State University's Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. If you have any interest in what we do, we encourage you to look at our website, gnar.usu.edu. But we're really here to facilitate this Western Night Skies webinar. The Western Night Skies Council is part of our work at the GNAR Initiative, and we're excited to support and collaborate with them. And their effort is to really bring regional perspective and coordination to this topic of night skies conservation and protection in the West. So thank you, and especially a thanks to Brent and Dawn Davis Photography for letting us play some of their beautiful imagery to get our webinar started. We encourage you, if you're interested in more, to visit their website. But I wanted to kick things off really quickly with an introduction and sort of the purpose of this webinar, as well as an overview of what we're going to cover today. So first of all, this is the first webinar in a series of future webinars planned by the Western Night Skies Council, where we're really going to host and invite you to be part of conversations that are relevant to the Western United States and talk about how we can work together to conserve this really important resource. So this first webinar really lays a foundation about understanding dark skies, why it's important, and some of the challenges that are up in the future. And we really wanted to tackle this subject by bringing a subset of the people that are working throughout the region, kind of on the ground, to hear their insights, some of their challenges, and talk through some of the potential for Western night skies conservation. There will be additional webinars in the future where we'll hopefully take a deep dive into some of the topics that people find important. We actually have a webinar coming up called the Minor in Dark Skies, a transdisciplinary approach to education, which is highlighting some of the great work that's happening at the University of Utah through their Dark Skies minor. So today, just kind of an overview of the webinar. I want to get into it as quickly as possible. We'll have a short introduction about the Western Night Skies Council from Aubrey Larson, who's the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative Coordinator. That'll hopefully set the stage as to why we're all here and what some of the exciting things that are happening, what's going on. And then we'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll have a series of questions organized by themes across talking about dark sky advocacy and communication, action through the International Dark Skies Places program, and then spreading awareness about dark sky preservation. So, and then we'll have a part for audience Q&A. And just to describe how that works, in the bottom of your screen, if you hover down, you should have a Q&A button. There's one that allows you to chat, as well as one that facilitates question and answers. We're encouraging you to use the Q&A button. So if you have a question that pops up as you listen to the panelists, please feel free to click on that button and then shoot us a question that we can then pose to our panelists at the end. Okay. So without any other delay, I want to turn the time over to Aubrey to introduce the webinar today. Aubrey?
Thanks, Jake. And I'm going to briefly share my screen with each of you just to set the stage, like Jake mentioned. I promise I'm only going to take a couple minutes, and then we'll get to our awesome panelists for today. And I apologize. You'd think I'd be able to do this super fast by now. Okay, here we go. Hopefully you can see my screen. Thumbs up. Awesome. So as Jake mentioned, my name is Aubrey Larson. I work for the state of Utah's Community Development Office, and I am very fortunate to also serve as coordinator for the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative, which I've been able to do since May of 2018. And it's been quite the journey, and I've learned so much along the way and met incredible people like folks you'll meet later today. As our title says, this theme of our webinar is Dark Skies of the West, the Final Frontier, and we are absolutely leaning into the Star Trek nerdiness. Don't worry, it's subtle, it's not too heavy-handed, but it's a safe space for nerds, so all are welcome here. And my purpose is just to lay the foundation for the Western Night Skies Council, talk a little bit about our vision, and then I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves. So the idea for the Western Night Skies Council was born out of a desire to improve upon the mission of the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative and better meet the needs and goals of the communities we serve. So if you were to take the mission of the cooperative and break it down, this is the core, these 5 elements. I'm not going to read through them. I'm sure our panelists will touch on these topics later on, but this is essentially the core mission of the cooperative. And after talking to the GNAR Initiative, it just made sense to partner, and it expanded our audience and our ability to connect with more people from the 11 Western states. And I say, go big or go home. So I'm excited to see what we accomplish together. Here's just a visual of the session abstract, if you will. It's illustrating the pockets of natural darkness remaining in the 11 Western states, making them pretty special. And I'm sure everyone on the panel today has reasons why their state is special, and we'll share some stories and perspectives that will add to the richness of this conversation. I'm highlighting here, as you can see, there are 2 dark sky cooperatives now. The Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative is represented by that thicker yellow line, and then the Colorado Plateau is that darker red line. So just in summary, the Western Night Skies Council presents a platform for sharing resources and information, increasing dialogue, and providing mutual support for the diverse group of night sky conservation advocates throughout the Western United States. And we recognize that there are different goals depending on where you live, your community, whatever you want to accomplish, but we do center around the same value of protecting the dark sky. And if that was too wordy for you, I promise this is my only direct Star Trek quote. If you've watched any Star Trek episode, you'll see something or hear something like this at the beginning, where no one has gone before. Really, the purpose of this council is to highlight that someone has gone before, whether you're a gateway community that wants to diversify your economy and bring astrotourism, if you're a rural town that wants to preserve your heritage and that rural character, if you're a park that wants to have night sky programming, if you're a community in a park that want to work together, someone's done that, and we can learn from all of these incredible advocates that live throughout the West. And we're fortunate to have 6 of them on the call today. So the council is all about connection, communication, and collaboration. The 3 C's, they're kind of catchy, so we're running with it. And then I saw this pattern with these numbers. I just thought that was fun to illustrate. There's thousands of incredible people, 49 international dark sky parks, over 20 council members, 16 certified international dark sky communities, 11 Western states, 2 dark sky cooperatives, and 1 big starry sky, which is kind of cheesy, but it just illustrates all the incredible things that are happening in this part of the nation. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, and I guess we could just go in order that we have listed. So starting with Sue, Husch.
I'll unmute myself here. Thank you very much, Aubrey. I'm Sue Husch, and I bring greetings from beautiful downtown Ridgeway. We are the 3rd designated Colorado dark sky community in the state. And locally, we're also working on a dark sky park designation for Top of the Pines here in the county. I serve as the administrator for the Peaks, Plateaus, and Canyons Association. Formed in 1993, PPCA is an umbrella organization of nonprofits who run bookstores and educational programs on public lands across the Colorado Plateau. Our members are linked by terrain and mission and purpose and water and, of course, night skies. And they collaborate to promote the understanding and stewardship of the Colorado Plateau. Our members participate in mutually beneficial projects, such as development of sales items for their stores, and also in networking and training. We normally meet twice a year in person at one of our member sites, but we're Zooming this year too. So, and we really appreciate being part of this webinar. So thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Next is Dawn Nilson.
Hi, I've been a dark sky advocate for over 11 years. And as a professional natural resources planner and a lifelong amateur astronomer, as soon as I learned about light pollution and its harmful effects, I joined the cause. For about 10 years, I've been the dark sky preservation director for Rose City Astronomers, a large astronomy club in Oregon. I'm an IDA delegate and a co-founder of IDA Oregon, where I served as its first chair. I'm an active member of the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network with similar goals as Western Night Sky Council. Also an active member of the Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative and the Western Night Sky Council.
Thanks, Dawn. Next, we have Carol Cole.
So I think I'm unmuted. I'm coming to you from Central Idaho. I work with the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve. We were established in December of 2017. I started working on the planning. I'll talk some more about that later as a Forest Service employee, and then transitioned to, I'm not sure what I was at that point. I retired from the Forest Service, but I stayed working with the group. And now I think just recently I've become the president of the not yet quite formed Idaho Dark Sky Alliance. We're establishing a nonprofit to kind of bring together all those entities. So yeah, we were the first reserve in the US. We have about 900,000 acres within the reserve. And yeah, it's been a journey. So we'll talk more about that later.
Thank you, Carol. Galen Gisler.
Hi, I'm in Los Alamos, New Mexico. I'm a retired astrophysicist, worked for 25 years or so at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. For the past 5 or 6 years, I've been doing planetarium programs at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, PEAK. In fact, I'm giving one this Friday night if anyone wants to join in. And also a mentor to the astronomy club at the Los Alamos High School. The telescope in the background is one that I took up to Wyoming with 8 high schoolers to observe the 2017 solar eclipse. With a bunch of people from PEAK and our neighboring national park units and other organizations in the area, we've been forming the Jemez Mountains Night Sky Consortium. It started with a meeting almost exactly 1 year ago. And our main project at the moment is in drafting a new light ordinance for Los Alamos County to replace the outdated one that was written about 20 years ago and badly needs updating. And somebody just asked me, how can we join the Jemez Mountains National Night Sky Consortium? And just write to me and I'll put my email in the chat. Thanks. And thanks, Aubrey, for inviting our group to the Western Skies Council and for this webinar.
Thank you, Galen. Good to have you. And I have to say, you probably have the most interesting background of any of us on today for sure. Next, we have Daniel Bullets. Daniel, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, my name is Daniel Bullets. I'm with the Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians, and we were the first tribal nation to be designated a dark sky nation in 2015. I'm the cultural director for the tribe, and dark skies are really important to my people culturally, not only in the past, but in the present today. Pardon me for my voice. I'm just getting over a sickness. I contracted COVID a couple weeks ago and I've been out, so my voice is kind of in and out. So sorry about that. But culturally, it's really important to my tribe to bring back what we have lost and what we have has been hidden. Basically, we're starting to find that now, and it's starting to affect us in really interesting and good ways. And I would like to thank Aubrey for having me on this panel today. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. We're so glad you're here, and I hope you get feeling better. It's been quite the year, hasn't it? Next, we have Ryan Parker, and then Ryan will segue into our first cluster of group discussion and questions.
Sounds good. Daniel, I'm so glad to know there's another dad with kids in the back room. Prior to this, my daughter plugged the toilet, so I had to pause for a moment. With that said, I'm Ryan Parker. I'm in Castle Pines, Colorado, and I am the chairman for the International Dark Sky Association Colorado chapter.
Perfect, Ryan, thank you. And we're going to start with our first themed group of questions, which center around dark sky advocacy. So Ryan, do you want to take it away with the first question? Why are you an advocate of protecting the natural night skies?
Awesome. I'm an advocate of protecting the natural night skies because it all started when I was about 9 years old. I was up in the high country with my grandfather, who gathered my cousins and I around a fire. And he's telling a story about his children, my aunts and uncles, when they were about my age at the time, and they saw something miraculous in the sky with these green orbs, and they all came together in the heavens, and then they met up with another one and then zoomed across the sky. And as a 9-year-old, I was like, what was that? I was fascinated and terrified. So coupled with my life growing up as a 5th-generation Coloradan on a farm, I learned the value of hard work and respect for life. And then as I continue to grow, those values were instilled in me to be a good steward of God's creation and to become a brother and sister's keeper of what we have. And so I became an advocate of those night skies because of that. And today I have a real estate company called Good Neighbor Living that's committed to sustainability and proactive lifestyle. Because as I look at where I am in my life, being a father of 3, I'm like, what can I do to make a difference? And if it's to be, it's up to me. So it's kind of important. We're all connected. And I realize, just like a piece of trash floating around on the ground, if I don't pick that up, who will? So there's an ownership. And that's why I'm an advocate of protecting the natural night skies.
And Ryan, can you talk to us about how your approach to talking about dark skies has changed since you began your mission to protect them?
Yeah, my approach to talking about dark skies has changed since I began to protect them, mainly because as you get older, you start questioning your, the meaning of life, if you will. If you have children, and even if you don't, your career path, your limit to your age. And so I started thinking about my ancestors and what they did here in Colorado 5 generations ago and helped building up the city as master masons and farmers and ranchers. And they stood for something and they believed in something that now that they're gone, they've passed this on to me, my late grandfather and grandmother. And so I started thinking about that legacy portion of it. And initially, when I got involved, it was for a reason that a lot of people may not realize, but I was angry. As a Coloradan, other places in the Western skies area, you might relate to this. Your state is changing. The natural night and the landscape is changing. People are moving in. And ironically, here I sell houses, but yet at the same token, I'm also a member of the Nature Conservancy. So I'm like, let's do this the smart way, people. And instead of just being angry all the time, I want to do something about it. So I got involved. And I came across initially as, hey, turn off your lights, you big jerk. Obviously, that's not well received. So I started realizing the more I talk to great people such as yourselves, that there's a better approach. And the first approach is, just in business, is what's important to you? What's your story? The reality is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when I started asking the question, hey, just out of curiosity, Mr. Neighbor, why do you leave your lights on at nighttime? Is it fear? Is it safety? And then it opens up a dialogue where I can show people there's a better way if they're willing to listen. So that's why my approach has changed to be more positive. And that's the mission of the IDA as well, is approaching these challenges with a positive bend to it. 10% of the people you talk to, they won't care. And that's just the reality of it. But those who have ears, they will listen. So we just have to keep that in mind, is put ourselves in their shoes first and take time to hear what they have to say and then connect the dots and just be positive.
Thanks, Ryan.
You bet.
Just kind of building on what Ryan shared, dark sky advocacy and effective communication is so important, and using even different terms can be challenging. this next question I'm going to pass to Sue is, how can we best present a unified message among all the partners, locations, agencies, and supporters? And other panelists, feel free to also speak up.
Thanks. This was a question that came from me and also from our members. There are 14 member organizations of Peaks, Plateaus, and Canyons Association, and we encompass the entire Colorado Plateau, and we actively work in a unified voice. So many of our members have achieved dark sky designation or are in the application process. And because the public lands that our members care for include some of the darkest skies in the country, as you saw on the map that Aubrey had up earlier, and since there are no state or local borders to the sky, we feel that it's important to stress the value of this resource to all our visitors. PPCA has added a dark sky page to our website where we post news from members and links for people to use. And we're pleased as PPCA to be part of the IDA and part of the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. And we see these as good avenues to continue to share information and spread correct information and a united message about the benefits and the need for the clear dark night skies for people and for wildlife. But we as a unit also are still looking for more ways to coordinate and to join forces in these efforts. And we feel like things like this webinar and other presentations will be really good tools for that. So that's what I have.
Perfect, thank you, Sue. And Galen, how do you get people to understand the difference between bad lighting and good lighting?
So the most important thing for people to realize is that more light is not necessarily good, that in fact can be bad lighting. And so I'd like to share a graphic that was produced by Didier Salmon, a friend of mine who I believe is also on this call, which illustrates some of the concepts that we're dealing with. The International Dark Sky Association has developed this, and also the International Society of Illuminating Engineers, or whatever it's called, to develop this bug rating, BUG rating, which classifies light from a fixture into backlight, uplight, and glare, as opposed to the useful light. So in this graphic here, we have a street light, which is intended, of course, to illuminate the street for drivers to be driving along, and also sidewalks on either side of the street. But if the light is also producing light that shines into the windows of houses in the neighborhood, or into the eyes of people who are walking toward it and could be blinded by it, then it's not useful light. In fact, it's dangerous light. Similarly, light that goes in the opposite direction from the intended direction of the light is also a form of what we call light trespass. And of course, we want no light at all to be emitted in directions above the horizontal plane, because that is of no use at all to people on the ground and contributes immensely to light pollution. So I think, having diagrams like this and also diagrams of what kind of fixtures are good and what kind are not so good, that will help a lot. But the key thing is for people to realize that more lighting is not necessarily better than less, and so that's what we have to get across.
Yeah, thanks, Galen, and Aubrey. Thank you for helping us answer some questions or pose some questions to our panelists. Our next group is going to build off of this idea of there are challenges, and there's a lot of different voices, there's a lot of different messages, and we wanted to transition to talking a little bit about how are some folks taking action, especially when it comes to the International Dark Skies Places program in particular. So Dawn, I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions, and then I would like you to transition and maybe lead asking questions of the remainder of our panelists, if that's okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, my first question is hopefully somewhat simple, but hard to, I want you to distill down into 10 words what you think is needed to stop the spread of light pollution in the Western states?
So I've been asked
And I'll
this.
count.
Okay, I've been asked this a lot by journalists and other concerned citizens, and I have pulled it on a slide. And I hope folks write it down. Public awareness, which is what this is about, local leadership, lighting regulations, busting safety myths, and forging a new paradigm.
Don, would you be willing to repeat that? That is wonderful.
Okay, public awareness, events like this, local leadership, lighting regulations, busting safety myths, myths like more and brighter light is better light, which that's not necessarily so, and forging a new paradigm in terms of, do we want skylines with full of lights and houses full of lights, or do we want stars?
Awesome. Thank you, Don. Well distilled. So I have another question, and then, like I said, I'll turn it over to you to ask the questions of the other panelists. And while I do that, I do want to recognize we have about 94 attendees right now from all over the West, and a couple people have mentioned they're from all over the United States writ large. So welcome everybody, those of you who might have joined a little bit late. So Don, to sort of build on that question, what do you think are some of the biggest hurdles that we have to nominating international dark sky places in places other than national parks or state parks, such as what you're experiencing in Oregon?
Yeah, well, I think as of this month, we're maybe about 145 of these international dark sky places worldwide. And the lion's share of those are national and state parks. And the reason is because the kinds of things that make the process easier are already built into those types of places. So those types of places already often have a hired interpretive staff, already have a mission for passive use. They don't have a multi-use mission like other lands. They have already organized outreach programs. They have funding for their facilities. So some of them are even fortunate enough to have a Friends of the Park kind of organization. But when you get into these national and state and private forest and rangelands, those things aren't built in. And that's what, those are the kinds of hurdles we're addressing in the Oregon Outback, which is a huge area in southeastern Oregon that's about the size of West Virginia. And it's not unique in that there are these other really dark pools in the western area that aren't all national and state parks. And so I've broken down kind of hurdles into about 5 big ones. And some we've experienced already, and some we expect to experience in the Outback. The first is forming a large enough group of volunteer support, because we don't have hired staff that's responsible for outreach and interpretation. But to get enough of these volunteers over what is an expansive area with a very small population. And the first step that we've used to address this is actually establishing this dark sky network. And I'm going to quote the mission. The Oregon Dark Sky Network is a voluntary grassroots initiative to build an alliance of communities, businesses, local governments, ranchers, state and federal agencies, tribes, and Oregon Outback night sky enthusiasts to support a shared principle, to support a set of shared principles resulting in mutual community benefits and the long-term conservation of our starry night heritage. The second hurdle is building an understanding among these communities, these dark sky communities, that IDA has no regulatory authority. That's the notion that many folks have. And they have no authority over land use in particular. That's the issue. And our message and our response to that is simply that this is a voluntary program. IDA runs a voluntary program. And it's really a program that awards good stewardship and public outreach in these dark sky locales. Nothing else. No one's going, the only penalty if you don't abide is you lose recognition. There's no financial penalties, there are no lawsuits, there's no loss of rights. And that's a really important part of bringing the public to understand. The third is dispelling this notion that once you get this dark sky certification, and those lines are on the map, that's going to lead to or create additional land use restrictions beyond those that are already on some of these lands that we're talking about, like national forest and national rangelands, those managed by the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. And, you know, the response to that is that the only restriction in getting a nomination and maintaining your certification is to have public lighting that already meets dark sky friendly criteria, or, you know, or part of the plan is to improve that lighting to meet dark sky criteria. And that's it. Fourth is finding funding, because again, there are no funds for these outreach and interpretive programs. So finding funding and an organizational vehicle for preparing a nomination. And then once putting in your nomination, if your site's certified, you have to maintain that site. You have to keep it, you know, dark as planned. Finally, because, you know, especially in the outback, we've got several landowners. We have private and public from state and federal and various agencies. There's likely this need to put together an interagency agreement, just a gentleman's agreement per se. Again, nothing legally binding, but just a gentleman's agreement to help that come along. So did you want to introduce Carol, or shall I, Jake? So I just want to say we have Carol Cole here, who has been part of the group responsible for our nation's first dark sky reserve over a huge area in Idaho. And I'd love to ask Carol, what's worked in Idaho to maintain coordination between the various partners involved in the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve?
Well, I would say a little bit of everything. It like I said initially, it has been a process, and we were lucky in Central Idaho that there had already been some work done in the cities and the counties that are incorporated within the Dark Sky Reserve, that most of them already had ordinances, and there was some interest in maintaining dark skies and addressing lighting within those communities. But, you know, it definitely wasn't a cakewalk with any of that. When we first started, it was about a 2-year process to get our application together in a concerted effort. That followed the couple decades of work in the communities, just working on dark sky issues. So it wasn't a quick process, and I think that's the first thing. And a lot of it relates to what you mentioned, just about the types of areas that we work in. The recreation area, the National Recreation Area is within the Sawtooth National Forest. So most of the land area within the reserve is managed by National Forest. And then as part of the reserve idea is there are those communities around the edges that contribute to maintaining the dark skies within the reserve. And that was Ketchum and Sun Valley in Blaine County, which is one of the more blue counties in Idaho, and had most of the interest from that. And then the other county that kind of divides the reserve in half is Custer County. And that county tends to have more traditional views and, you know, a more conservative approach to life and the people that are there. So it was always, when I worked for the Forest Service, it was the same communities that we worked between. So always maintaining that and bringing the people to the table to realize that they already had an interest in dark skies. You know, we went, what's the word? We went fast to move slow, or we went slow to move fast, or whatever. So that we could bring everybody to the table first and realize that, hey, you know, this is a really cool place. We already recognize that dark skies are part of our heritage in this area. People kind of take it for granted sometimes, but we incorporated work with the schools and local photographers and astronomers before we ever really started talking about putting the reserve in place. I mean, we were already talking about it as the planning group, but we didn't go out with our first, you know, notice to the public saying, hey, we'd like to get this reserve in place here. Isn't that a cool idea? it took some time to build that interest and comfort within the community, I think. So I think it really is bringing together those different parts of the communities that you work in and knowing the people there. It was important that we had a big group who had individual relationships with all the people that we knew we were going to want to have at the table at some point. So that was a big help. And I think, I don't know what some of your other ones were. Oh, just about the regulation. And that was certainly a big part of getting the word out, is that it's not a regulatory process. It's like you said, it's a volunteer process, or it's a celebration of the dark skies that we already have here, and having that interest in sharing that resource with other people. So I think that was something, you know, I don't want to mislead people, you know, that, oh, we're going to do, you know, A, and then we're going to sneak around the back and do B. But I think it's just making sure that you're bringing people along at the beginning, and so that they can feel a part of the process.
Thanks, Carol. That's kind of been our aim too, is grassroots, grassroots, grassroots. This has to come from the community, or it's not a good idea. So thanks, and much continued success. And Daniel, you've had your dark sky place for over 5 years. So you're not a newbie as well as Carol's organization is. And I'm wondering, how has being certified in international dark sky community affected your tribe and your tribe's culture?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Well, for us, it was kind of ironic because in our culture, once the tribe got designated, then things started to our cultural activities kind of started to fall into place for some reason. And during our research, we found out that the Bighorn Sheep was a really big part of our night sky stories and songs and legends. And a year after we were designated, Bighorn Sheep started to come back to our tribe. We now have a Bighorn Sheep program for our tribe. And did that influence it? I'm sure it did. You know, the way we believe is things happen for a reason. And that reason was for us to be reconnected, not only with the sky, but reconnected with what lives under the sky as well. The animals, our community, our surrounding community. And so it's had a really big effect on the Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians since we've been designated.
And I wanted to ask, has there been any conversation with the with any of the other bands, like in the northern bands, like?
You know, all tribes are different in size and in where they live. Some tribes are checkerboard and have to deal with state regulations and county regulations. You know, some tribes are like my tribe, which has a land base, and we govern ourselves. So it was easier for us to go through the IDA application process because we didn't have to deal with any of the outside state agencies, county agencies, or anything. We just dealt all tribal. So other tribes don't have that luxury, I guess, and so I get calls every now and then about how did we do it, and that's my emphasis is each tribe is different, and you know, work with, like you were saying, your grassroots people that want this to be done.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you. There's a couple of questions coming into the Q&A, and I encourage the audience, our participants, please take some time. If you have a question, keep those coming in. We're going to curate those at the end. So the questions are for you, Daniel, and the questions for some of the other panelists, I'll make sure that we Aubrey and I curate and cover those and propose them to the panelists. But thank you for giving some, I guess, really place-based examples of what's happened, especially in regards to the International Dark Sky Places program. But with that, and Daniel mentioned it, Don mentioned it, Carol mentioned that idea of sort of raising awareness and getting the conversation started with people that may not necessarily perceive the dark sky as an asset or recognize that it's disappearing, as well as the challenge of what, or maybe misnomers or misinformation about what the dark sky programs are, or what your aim might be as an individual organization. So I wanted to ask a couple more questions as we go to our final pod or final group of thematic questions. So first of all, I wanted to ask Sue if you could give us some ideas about how do you get people to look up into the sky. You've had some experience of raising awareness, but that idea of have we as a people, as a generation, perhaps forgotten what's above us, and how do you get people to remember that? Could you speak to that? And then I'll turn the rest of the time over to you to ask some other panelists some questions.
Great, thank you. I was raised in the suburb of Chicago, and spent my summers there particularly. And somehow before the internet, my cousin was able to track on celestial events and meteor showers and things like that. And so we dutifully get our lawn chairs out and get our sleeping bags out and go sit outside. And between the haze of the humidity and the light pollution, we'd see maybe one planet, maybe on a good night, but a lot of planes, and we were out there trying at least, and it wasn't until my family moved to Denver in the late 60s that I actually knew what the night sky could look like. And Denver, of course, in the late 60s still had some pretty spectacular night skies. So our members in banding together on some of these issues, since 1991, the South Rim of the Grand Canyon, and I think some of Brent and Don's photographs were from, the Grand Canyon has played host to this Tucson Astronomy Club Star Party. And the club members are allowed to take over a parking lot on the South Rim at the Yavapai Visitor Center. And they set the massive telescopes up, bring them up on their trucks, and they set them up and they stay 24 hours a day. So they're all night long, and then they set up early and they're there and visitors can come through and they use laser pointers and they're all super knowledgeable and they help people, look at the night sky. And our members host guided viewing opportunities in other places and in towns and in other reserves, but also celebration events of the night sky and speakers and lecture series on topics. A lot of our members are able now recently to sell telescopes. We've also always sold star charts, but we have binoculars and books and t-shirts. Some of our members have this great concert tee now. So it has all of the dark sky parks on the Colorado Plateau on this kind of concert style t-shirt. And we also have brochures, free brochures in most of the public lands areas that tell people about the night sky resources. And so I feel like all of that goes together as trying to help people understand that it's time to look up when you go outside. However, and also I should say ranger talks. I mean, we have a lot of different things, but one of the things that all of our members have realized and come up against, and it's been touched on a couple of times, is that people are not often comfortable going outside at night. They believe it's dangerous, it's intimidating to them because they don't know what's out there. Is it the mountain lions, and is it, all of the, and the sounds, they don't know the sounds and they don't know their way around places. And so, organized events like the star parties are are a safer alternative to get people out there to start looking. And that's one of the, but all of that, kind of goes together to say, when people come to our places, we say, have you looked at the night sky? And a lot of times they're like, what? Why would we do that? So, I feel like the more awareness out there. And then I also wanted to touch on one thing that happened from one of the calls that we did a while ago, which was we've shifted a lot of our verbiage from dark sky to night sky. just because we feel like dark sky really has that connotation of the darkness and the danger and the, all of the unknowns. But night sky is relatable pretty easily to everyone. And I feel like that's a maybe friendlier term, and an easier way to kind of get, not buy-in, but to have people feel a little bit more at ease with what the kinds of things that we're talking about. So, and that kind of led me to Galen's next question about what's most helpful in getting people interested in looking up at the night skies. And Galen, you were asking about mythology or of the constellations or science. And so if you'd like to take it from here, that'd be great.
Yes, I would. First, I would like to address that point of dark versus night in terms of the terminology, dark sky versus night sky. If you're at a truly dark site, the night sky is actually quite bright, with the Milky Way and all the stars and everything. And so, focusing on that, and that's why we called our little organization the Jemez Mountains Night Sky Consortium, because we want to preserve that. So yeah, the question was, every culture in the world has stories related to the stars, and of course it was natural before the invention of artificial light for people to, around campfires or whatever, to make up stories or to pass on the stories they've heard from before. And of course, dominant in our culture are the stories from the Greek mythologies, but the tribes have their own stories of the night sky, and they populate the night sky differently with different creatures and all that sort of thing. And so to some extent, that is something that raises people's interest in the night sky. If you can relate to them, the stories that our culture or their culture or whatever has shared for years and years and years, for millennia really, about what those things that we see up there are. But for me as a scientist, as an astrophysicist, the really exciting thing about the night sky is what we have managed to learn about our place in the universe, about how our sun came to be, how all of the the structure of our galaxy and on out to the structure of the whole universe. I mean, it's a very inspiring and a very inspiring story, which at its root is not that complicated, but it took us a long time to get there, and the getting there, the steps that we had to take, the knowledge that we had to gain incrementally, bit by bit, over the last 2,000 years, really, is an amazing story, and that's kind of what I like to share when I'm out in at a gathering, at a night sky event or whatever. That there's Betelgeuse. It's a red giant. It may explode as a supernova anytime soon. There's Sirius, which has a white dwarf companion. Our sun will someday be a white dwarf. Things like that. Those are the things that really excite, and the star clusters that we see, here and there throughout the sky. Those are stepping stones on the way to assembling this entire worldview that really the whole world has been working on. The picture of our universe for the last 2,000 years, really, so there's those two sides, the star stories and the science. I think they're both valid, and different people may respond to them in different ways. And I would like to hear if other people have ideas about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, maybe for the larger panel. Anybody in the panelists want to tackle that idea of ways that you've gotten people involved? As Galen mentioned, there's stories and there's legend, and then there's the science. Is there anything else that you've seen in your individual organizations that have worked really well to get people interested in what they may not know is beyond the haze of maybe where they live? Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, part of it comes from living in the Sun Valley, Ketchum area, resort area. So there's a lot of tourist traffic and visitors that come through. And I think it's finding ways, but even if it's not that kind of an area, it's finding ways to connect with all different kinds of groups. whether it's the local Boy Scouts or conventions that come in and they want to add to their, schedule and have a night sky. I mean, we've had several of those, well, until this past year. We had several of those requests from groups that came for conventions at Sun Valley. And we would go out and do some kind of night sky event at, a medical group or insurance group or whatever it would be. So I think it's just being open to spreading that story with whoever might be interested.
I'd like to add, I haven't done this yet, but it's on my set of goals for 2021, and that's to get one of those bat monitors. So I'm an amateur astronomer, and I've done lots and lots and lots of public star parties, now even online. And that's great. And the stars are wonderful. They're wonderful for us, but they're so wonderful for wildlife as well. And so bringing the people in who are more concerned maybe about the wildlife than the stars is to get people outside together in a gathering where you do owl walks, where you do have a bat monitoring, and you can hear the click, click, clicks of the bats. And so you might not see them right away, but you'll hear them. And that's a great way to get families engaged and people learning more about being outside and how rich and important the night is to most animals. There's so many that are nocturnal. So that's something that I'm hoping to do this year, and hope that others will too, incorporate into their nighttime events.
Don, can I touch on that real quick?
Go ahead.
So in the comments section of the chat room, I did mention nature's educators, and somebody mentioned the buy-in phrase. It's just a terminology, so try not to be offended by that term. It's getting people to understand the importance of what we do as far as being protectors of the night. And so, Dawn, to mimic what you were saying, we would bring in nature's educators who had the nocturnal animals. And when people can see firsthand the snakes and the owls, it takes adults back to being children. All of a sudden they see, oh, this is real. Not only can we see the rings of Saturn or the moons of Jupiter, now we're seeing the eyes of an owl, the stripes on a snake. It becomes very real to them. And that's the biggest impact that I've seen in the public outreach.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Galen, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah. I just saw a comment in the chat by a spectroscopist who writes, the entire science of light is a great entree into dark sky issues for the science-minded who don't happen to be astronomers. I totally agree. And, and spectroscopy for sure, is one way that we have learned most of what we know, in fact, about stars and their lifetimes and evolution and all of that sort of thing. So yes, I heartily agree. And I think, light is a fantastic question. I think actually I'm now supposed to pass another question on to Carol. If there's no more on this issue.
Yeah, Galen, just before you do that, I was curious, to maybe ask Daniel, for coming from a culture that has so much history in the sky, what are some ways that you've worked with your tribe or maybe people outside your tribe to have these kind of conversations, about looking up and appreciating the night sky where you have such a history of it in your culture?
Well, for us right now, we're still in the learning process, and we do get asked from the monuments around us that if we would be willing to share, and the tribe, it's very sensitive about among other tribes too, are sensitive about sharing with outsiders, and we are starting to find out now that by sharing, it not only lets people know who you are and where you are and where you come from, it opens up that dialogue to where you're just people. We're just people talking to each other, where before it was like, we can't talk to you because you're such and such, or we can't be around you because you're such and such. Now we are seeing that it's opening a dialogue with our surrounding communities and other people that we've never talked to. So it's pretty important, and it helps us, that way.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, Galen, go ahead.
Okay, so so this question is for Carol, and for other panelists. How can we get more people involved in the effort to reduce light pollution? And I also saw something else in the chat about potential outreach programs, educational programs to schools and the general public, presumably on the subject of light pollution. So, Carol?
Yeah, I saw that question there too. And my background has been in environmental education and interpretation. So when I see those kinds of questions, I'm always kind of drawn to those. But I think one, example certainly is, and everyone may already know that, the Globe at Night project, which is kind of that international project of getting kids and other people involved in getting out to look out and document what they're seeing in the night. But here, for the educational programs, we also just developed a series of short presentations for in the classroom. Again, this was before last year, about the different aspects that IDA has, put out, about wildlife and about human health. And, it had to be fairly simple ideas that we were sharing with, because it was a program through one of our local nonprofits that talked with fourth graders. So it wasn't a lot of in-depth information, but it was just some general information about the different topics, because you never know what particular topic individuals might be interested in. And then back to the other question, just getting other folks involved. Again, I think it's just being an opportunist. If we see something out there that we think we could be a part of and jump into or add some information to, we just have to be kind of proactive about that and getting the word out and being kind of creative in the connections we see that people might have to kind of broaden that circle. If you get a request we've had some programs on the local Outdoor Idaho PBS programs here in Idaho, that they incorporated some dark sky information into some of their Outdoor Idaho programs. So I think it's just being open and being kind of that, put on your creative hat to think about how you can connect with different people. We did a presentation actually quite 3 years ago, I think, at a brown bag that's sponsored by the local hospital, about some of the health issues related to dark skies as well. So I think it's just finding those different communities and connecting with them in whatever way we can.
Yeah, anyone else on the panel want to take that question about getting people involved in the effort to reduce light pollution? Maybe something that's worked in your own areas or other chapters or other groups that you've worked with that's gone well. Ryan, go ahead.
Good. Hey guys, it's Ryan. So previously I had mentioned a little, answered a question earlier. And my father and I have a company called Backyard Genius. And we started helping schools, the local elementary schools, with an invention convention. And so we built an actual lighting display with the good and the bad and the ugly lights, but showcasing the potential energy and the electrical energy and stored energy by having these switches. And it was fascinating to have an entire library with all these fourth grade children, there's 100 of them or so. And when we turn off the lights, kids kind of mumble, oh, it's dark. And then we turn on the really bad, fully exposed, unshielded light. They all just cringe, they cover their eyes. And then we showed the really good light that was fully shielded. And little children would raise their hand and said, oh, there's a light like that shines in my bedroom window at night. And then we would give the pamphlets out and say, guys, we all can make a difference just simply by shielding the light. And I got a few days later, I was stopped in the grocery store and a parent said, hey, we need to have a talk. And I was like, uh-oh, what happened? And as it turns out, the children went home and talked to their parents. And now a number of homeowners have changed out their lighting specifically because of that one class session. The children get it. And they are in an educational and informative way.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Anybody, any other panelists have any ideas that they'd like to share with the audience? Yeah, Galen, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the meetings that we've had of the Jemez Night Sky Consortium, I mentioned that we're trying to put together a draft lighting ordinance for Los Alamos County, and a couple of the attendees at these meetings have been, Chamber of Commerce folks and government officials from Los Alamos County, and we've had a number of questions from that community, about how that will affect them and so forth, and we've tried to distribute this draft fairly widely, gotten limited feedback, but interestingly, the owner of a particular hardware store in town has contacted us, and they're going to do a renovation of one of their stores in the near future, and they want our advice on lighting, and so we're going to meet with them next week, and hopefully, not only be able to give them advice on the lighting that they will do in their renovation, but also what kinds of lights they should be stocking as a hardware store for use in the community and recommending to other people. So that's one tiny little inroad that we feel that we've made, and we hope to see others in the future.
Yeah, Galen, I guess to tie some of that together, before I get to you, Don, Ryan and Galen both highlighted maybe some ways to create a multiplier effect where teaching a handful of people that have influence, or children that can influence a greater audience, sometimes that message can be replicated and multiplied, which is pretty powerful. So Dawn, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, one of the things we did with the Basin and Range Dark Sky Cooperative recently was, to do a big end of summer online star party. And it was all live. We had astronomers, amateur astronomers in 3 states, and we, pulled it all together, and everybody was invited, and we kept it on very non-technical, and we kept it simple. So it was really a family opportunity. The time frame, the time of the event and everything else was focused on family and keeping it simple to just get other people excited. And then, the message of what you're seeing is provided by a dark sky or special filters with telescopes and so forth. But it was quite a success. It was a Facebook Live event, and we had up to 1,000 people at one point. So very effective.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for your tackling some pretty important questions that we as a panel talked about and wanted to share. But I want to transition a little bit to our audience questions. Again, we have a great group of people from all over the nation that have some interesting questions they've posed already. Some of you have answered them through the chat features, and there's been a few that have popped up through the chat features. So Aubrey and I are going to try to curate some of those and maybe bring a few of them together. But before I do that, I was remiss in highlighting Liz Soja, who is our GNAR coordinator, who's on as well, that's been doing the lion's share of the work, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank her for all of her efforts and not recognize her as part of our team. But I did want to start out maybe with a question that's challenging for all groups. And I do also have to recognize we invited Brent Davis, who shared photography onto the panel to help maybe answer some of the Q&A questions that came through that might be germane to what his work is. But a question for all the panelists is, any group that's trying to do something that's not being done by private entities, funding tends to always be a challenge, even if you're working with volunteers. So one of the audience members asked Sue particularly, but any of the other panelists, how do you continue your need for funding? Even if you're a volunteer organization, you still gotta print stuff off, you gotta do, there's some cost to nearly everything. How do you keep money coming through the door? There are great sources for funding that you're willing to share or that you've found success with that are aligned with the cause, that are willing to help keep your organization running.
Thanks, and thanks, Dave. PPCA is actually a different animal. as an umbrella organization, it's our members who have members. Our members each have membership programs, and also they raise funds through sales items in their stores and have fundraising arms as well. And so those, the funding for PPCA members to help get the word out actually comes through their membership and not through the umbrella organization as such. I know that locally, like Black Canyon Astronomical Society out of Montrose, they have members as well and do fundraising and, you know, have events and where they're asking for donations and things like that. I think that most of the funding for the organizations that I deal with would be coming that way. So it's a little different than most other organizations.
Yeah, any other folks, panelists that are making ends meet somehow? Ryan, go ahead.
So with our local chapter, we started to raise funds, albeit shortly right now, but your connection is unstable. We have several committees that we've established, and we'll be working on it more actively this year in 2021 to focus on those fundraising efforts. So like, for instance, Colorado Gives Day, by setting ourselves up when that opportunity comes, we have a chance to kind of pool more funds into our efforts so that we can share that with our members and be able to do more outreach activities. But I will give you an example, and I don't want to misspeak, but the folks down at Westcliff, they're kind of the pioneers when it came to having a designated community. They actually have a donations day where they get donations and they're able to give scholarships. And then there's also the community who has really embraced the natural night sky and astrotourism. And so they sell all kinds of merchandise. Several of our members and board members are doing the same thing, have created shirts. So, you know, little by little, we kind of add it together. But I think by increasing our awareness, we're able to bring in people that have a higher disposable income to maybe donate to the cause. One particular thing we did with the United Launch Alliance, when we did a big presentation to over 900 members at a big Christmas event, is we had a number of our astronomers there with amazing telescopes, and it was a fantastic venue. And they donated, I think it was $900 to our cause that goes into the pool for our event. So it's little things like that that, you know, add up and make a difference.
And I'll add a little bit to that. Again, maybe because I worked for the Forest Service that I kind of brought in that idea. But after we got the reserve established, we also put together an MOU between the 3 cities, 2 counties, and the Forest Service to kind of just establish and record what people initially thought their role would be in the reserve, because we know those positions in the cities and the agencies change over time. So we felt it was important that we capture those initial thoughts and commitments to supporting the operation of the Dark Sky Reserve, whether it's in, you know, funding, actually providing funding, or it's staff support from the agencies or the city. It was just important to establish that as something that we wanted to carry forward. So we had that kind of the jurisdictional group, oversight group that's involved in the MOU. And then, as I mentioned, we're now just going almost to the point of having a 501c3 organization established, because again, none of those 5 entities really were in a place to make a commitment to being the lead agency and to speak for the whole reserve. So it made sense for us in trying to incorporate all those different folks that we have kind of that overall organization, and hopefully that will work. You know, we are looking at some grants. We just put in a grant for an interpretive sign to go up in the reserve and some other things. So I think it's just, again, coming back to that group that you're working with and having them think about the folks that they work with to bring some of the funding and the in-kind support in.
Yeah, Carol, I think that brings a good point, that there's a lot of shared knowledge in different organizations, and that was one of the intents of bringing people together in this first meeting, to put faces and names together and organizations and faces together. But a lot of these organizations around the West are struggling to find funding or to do things, and trying to not invent the wheel again. So it's a great opportunity to bring voices together to share ideas. And Kara, that's a great insight in Ryan and Sue to some things that have worked for you, and I hope in the future we can continue to share some of these different ideas. But yeah, Aubrey, do you want to take, Don, did you have a comment as well? I don't want to cut you off.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add, just like Sue with the PPCA, Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network is relying on the members who can have the funding, because it's just an ad hoc group right now. Having been with IDA Oregon too, you have to be a 501c3 to collect money, to get donations. So if you aren't a nonprofit and you can't take donations in that way, you can just have others who are willing to just purchase the things that you need, set things up, buy the monitors and so forth.
Thanks, Don. One of the questions I get a lot is, how can we fund our dark sky efforts, or are there grants? Is there funding? And usually I have to say, get creative and keep your eyes open. There are grants out there that you can use or customize to whatever your goals are, such as children's education, for example. I know down in Kanab, the Stellar Vista Observatory recently received a grant, and that's how they got that funding. I want to welcome Brett and Don Davis again to the conversation. And this is a question, Brett and Don, for you. Gateway communities, the GNAR Initiative, a gateway community is a community that has some sort of relationship with a park or public lands. I'm curious if you would talk a little bit about those good neighbor relationships and how you've seen parks and communities work together to protect the night sky. And if you want to talk a little bit about your astrophotography as well, that would be fabulous.
Well, I think the partnership is really critical. There's success stories, and then there's stories that aren't quite as successful. I think a lot of the success stories tie into things you've all been talking about, which is working together with other groups. And we've been doing a lot of stuff with the National Park Service. And the National Park Service, as a government entity, has a lot of restrictions on things they can and cannot do. So to some extent, the parks rely a lot on their, as I believe it was Don that mentioned, their friend agencies, the Friends of Chaco or the Friends of Glen Canyon, because they have a lot more flexibility about the things that they can get involved with. They're also 501Cs, so they can take money, which the Park Service cannot. And it makes the outreach to the surrounding communities a lot more flexible than if it was just by the state or the park entity, because they have so many constraints about how they can conduct themselves as they interact with other entities. So it kind of ties back, I think, to everything else most of you have been saying, which is it's a group effort. There isn't, this little tight little small group that can make these things happen. It's that holistic partnership that really requires a lot of motivated people to get involved. The second question was about our astrophotography. I will say we don't have quite the technical expertise that a lot of you on this panel do. I'm retired from the IT field, but I've been doing photography for about 40 years, off and on my own, and we've spent a lot of time in the backcountry, actually in a lot of the areas that you all represent, done a lot of kayaking in the Idaho area that's now that reserve. Before it was a reserve, and a variety of other different places. So I sort of view our photography as part of that message and how to get people excited about this, because not everybody has or can afford telescopes, let alone do they have the celestial knowledge to really appreciate it. The star parties that we've been to are great because you have people that have both the technical knowledge of the actual device, but they also usually have the celestial knowledge to explain what you're looking at. So that's great. But if you don't have somebody like Galen there, it's tough for the average person to really appreciate and understand what they're looking at. So I sort of view our little role in this and what we've been doing to help with the Park Service and some others is to make it a little more accessible and easy to understand for people who perhaps don't have that level of technical expertise that everybody else does. So hopefully, my perception there is accurate and it does have some benefit, but I do think that not only still photography is an important component, but I think there's perhaps an untapped component or something that could be used a little bit more, which is to start putting together, and they don't have to be long, elaborate productions, but movies kind of like saving the night sky, and having that be part of the outreach so that you can show it to people who maybe don't have the opportunity for whatever reason to go to a star party. And it makes it a little more accessible and maybe shows people something that they can see with their own eyes. They don't need an expensive telescope or this or that they can just say, wow, okay, I understand what these people are about and why this is important. So that's sort of, I would say, at a high level where I think what we've been doing for the last few years as volunteers hopefully has a role in all this process.
Thank you, Brent.
Yeah,
Jake,
Brent,
were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's well said in the chat. Someone mentioned that there's an opportunity to sort of bring together the science and all the work that a lot of groups are doing and the policy, but there is a beauty to it, and without that, it's hard to make any headway, I think. And so I think all those little pieces coming together is the way forward. So thank you for sharing your work with us today, as well as the wider world. I had a question, or wanted to bring up a question to, there was a couple questions to you, Daniel, from the audience. One of them was about wondering if you had questions from your tribal members as you started to pursue your certification, about moving power into places where maybe there wasn't power, and if there was concerns that a designation would limit your tribal members' opportunities to get power where they may not have it right now, is sort of the question, as well as if you could give a little bit more information to the extent you're comfortable. You talked a little bit about the Bighorn Sheep. The question is if you could say a little bit more how that figured into the dark sky picture, and if you can answer or speak to more that you alluded to in your introduction.
Okay. So with the first question, it wasn't necessarily putting lighting in places that we don't want it. It was we approached it as not necessarily a lighting ordinance. We approached it as a lighting plan, and that helped us get across what we needed to say to get our community involved. And we wasn't putting actual restrictions on what they were doing. Now it was only for the new projects that were coming into the tribe. And so the tribe kind of membership kind of liked that idea and wanted to see where that went. So they approved our lighting plan, not ordinance. And so the tribe can build anywhere it wants, basically on its tribal land, but we have designated areas that we want to build on, and we want to keep most of our reservation pristine and untouched. So that's a little bit about the lighting plan. The Bighorn Sheep, they started to come back once we started to sing our songs that we found, and starting to tell the stories of how they affected the night sky and the different stars that were named after the Bighorn Sheep. And once we started doing that and having our little star parties here, we had star parties that invited the public, and we had star parties just for our reservation community where we brought these out. And once we started doing that, that's when people started noticing that these animals were coming back. You see them next to the road, you see them driving to work, and so that got the tribe into starting a Bighorn Sheep program. Now we have a cultural resource department that does have our stories and have our songs, and we're redeveloping our tribal Bighorn Sheep dance that was reconnected and refound during this IDA designation and the tribal looking into all this stuff that to help the tribe. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I think it's a beautiful, I guess, story to how things that are somewhat out of your control come into play when other things are happening. I think that's amazing. So thank you.
Hey, Jake, I had maybe a final or next to our last question, just open to all the panelists.
Sure.
It ties back to Don's earlier comments, the 10 words of how we can better protect night skies in the West. The last one, forging a new paradigm. My question is, how can the Western Night Skies Council, how can the cooperatives and NAR work together to help forge a new paradigm? I know that's a big question, but any responses or comments or ideas for us?
Well, this is Dawn, and I've used in my presentations an analogy that was given by an astronaut actually from Oregon, who said, you know, long ago people would come to a town and they would see these smokestacks. And when they saw the smokestacks, they said, this is a town of progress. This town is, you know, in economic progress. This is great. This is progress. And that's what we do now when we see skyscrapers and we see lights all over and we see areas inside the city that are brighter, literally brighter. There are places brighter than daylight, brighter than what the sun can produce. And we think that's all great because we've shut off the stars above and we've put all the lights below. And he said, wouldn't it be nice if in the future people come and they look at skyscrapers and they see all those lights and they look at cities and they see all those lights and they think, goodness, this isn't progress. Just like they started to see smokestacks. This is waste. This is backwards thinking. This is waste. And there's no community you can go to and see a smokestack and not think that. And it's the same hope that that's what we'll see. And I think it's all, if more people are aware of how precious, how wonderful, how deeply rooted in our being the natural night sky is, that there will be a new affinity. There will be a paradigm shift away from lighting up the earth in very, very unnatural ways and considering that to be progress instead of maintaining a natural night.
One thing that strikes me is the fact that, you know, you go back 200 years and there was no artificial lighting. Well, you know, gas lights, whale oil lights and stuff like that. And so everyone had the opportunity to visit the night sky, you know, on a nightly basis. You know, it was always there. And, you know, and the fact that the people kept time by the moon and by you know, the rising of certain stars at certain times and all that sort of thing that we have forgotten, you know, as a culture. And one of the members of our Jemez Mountain Night Sky Consortium, Phil Lipscomb, refers to it as the skies of our ancestors, that we want to bring back the skies of our ancestors. It's a very deep and eternal heritage that so many of us have lost. And you know, that's one thing that we always try to come back to.
I was actually going to say much the same thing. There's so many things that once we lose them, they're irreplaceable. Then the darkness is not. It's actually replaceable. We can make changes pretty quickly that make a big difference. And that's one thing that's heartening to me, is that it's not gone forever necessarily, like a lot of things are.
Yeah, I think it's just that there's a generation now that, you know, or even a few generations that haven't seen a night sky, that have no idea. And so they don't even know what they're missing. And that's why, you know, the folks here in our time of life are the volunteers, because we remember night and want to keep it that way for the next generations.
Any other closing thoughts on what the new paradigm would look like? I think that's a great question, Aubrey. Well, we want to respect the time of our attendees as well as our panelists. And I want to thank our panelists in particular for their time, their insights, their experience, and all their hard work they do outside of panels and outside of webinars to have something to share with us today. I thank especially Liz again and Aubrey and the Davis for sharing their art and their talents with us, for the organization. You guys are great, and I appreciate your time. Just a couple of things to talk about as I wrap up. Again, a reminder, in the chat, Liz just put in some information about where to get more information. As this movement grows, there is an opportunity to keep involved, to join and receive frequent updates and emails so that we can communicate with all of you. We encourage you to sign up there, as well as awareness that there is a webinar coming up. It's in February 3rd from 2 o'clock to 3:30, and it will be looking at in-depth the dark skies studies at the University of Utah and how that's come to be, what are some of the things that they're exploring there, and maybe some opportunities to team up with them in the future from wherever you might be at. And this is, like I said, the first of a webinar series that we hope will continue to delve into some of the topics that we just scraped the tip of the iceberg on. And that was intentional, to give a really broad sweep of some of the issues that are happening in our region and highlight some of these folks. And we hope to have them take deep dives into really hot topics, share information, as well as create a new opportunity for people across the West to talk about these issues and share ideas and communicate and connect with people and learn from each other. So we hope this is the start of something really exciting, and my hat's off to Aubrey and the panelists here for all the work that they do. So thank you so much. We'll be posting the recording of this as well as a curated version of the chat for folks that are interested in some of the resources and people that talked today. So thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everybody.